For retailers, COVID-19 sparked an era-defining pivot towards e-commerce. Engaging digital shopping experiences is now every retailer's battlefield. But as 2020 recedes into the history books, how far along this digital journey are we? Even, or perhaps especially for established brands, there's a lot of complexity involved in building an e-commerce offering. Retailers need to understand the opportunities and challenges of headless, composable, and contextual commerce stacks in order to build a foundation they can grow on. In this episode, we're talking to two of the leading experts on the front lines of e-commerce about how companies can best prepare to take advantage of the biggest technological shakeup in retail for about 10 years. You're listening to TechForce Middle East, a new podcast celebrating trailblazers in the region, and today we're joined by James Semple and Samiah. James is a composable commerce evangelist and spends the majority of his time speaking to some of the world's most exciting brands about their journeys towards headless commerce. His other passion includes music and telling dad jokes. We also have Samiah from Alshaya Group, who have been leading the e-commerce push in the Middle East with over 100 e-commerce sites and apps in MENA. James, Samiah, welcome to the show. Before we get into the future of e-commerce, shall we start with some icebreaker questions?
Absolutely.
Samiah, first to you. Online or in-store shopping?
Online, always.
James?
Wow, okay, that was a confident response. I think online for some things. There are some things I still would prefer to buy in store, I think. But it definitely is based on, which kind of product.
Samiah, what's the craziest thing you've ever bought online?
Has to be cow dung for my garden, by the way. Yes, that has to be the craziest thing.
James?
I can't compete with that, but I certainly think the thing that I was surprised I bought online was a guitar, which, on one side, maybe not a surprise, but on the other side, typically something I would prefer to try out in store. So it was kind of a surprise to myself that I did go out and buy one, and, obviously not a cheap purchase as well. So really, really good experience doing that as well.
Samiah, your favorite trend in e-commerce?
Social.
James?
It's not quite there yet, but I think contextual commerce is one of my most, one of the things that gets me really excited. The idea of buying while you're doing something else. And yeah, social could be seen as part of that. But I'm looking forward to kind of, shopping while I'm on TV, pausing a scene and buying products that are inside the scene I'm looking at. So yeah, contextual commerce is the thing that gets me excited.
Brilliant. We're going to talk a lot about that for the rest of the show. Samiah, if there was only one e-commerce site that you can shop in for the rest of your life, what would it be?
It has to be Amazon, I'm sorry. It has to be Amazon.
And James?
I'm glad Samiah said that, because I was like, should I say that? I think, I'll go with one of my favorite music stores, so they get a free advert. So Anderton's in Guildford. It has phenomenal set of products, and so I always buy stuff from those guys all the time. So.
And Samiah, if you were able to set up your own e-commerce store, what product would you sell?
It has to be bags. I love bags. And shoes.
James, bags and shoes for you?
Probably digital products like downloadable music, something like that.
Fantastic. Guys, now that we're warmed up, let's get down to business. James, this is to you. We just talked about e-commerce being a massive part of the digital transformation of online companies. Do you think that we'll ever go back to in-store or in-person buying and selling, or will we move completely towards online commerce?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. One of the things that I noticed was that when COVID's lockdown started to end, I noticed that a lot of customers, as you said previously, I speak to hundreds of customers every year, and so. Hundreds of retailers. And I noticed the first thing that happened was that they said, well, great, we've got people coming back in store. But then after 2 years of selling, purely online, I noticed that a lot of retailers were quite disappointed with many of the features of in-store. If you think about somebody coming online, you know a lot about their existing history, if they've still got items left in their basket, things like that. You're able to do intelligent upselling, intelligent recommendations. If I walk into a store, you don't know if I'm one of your best customers are coming in there to rob you. So, this idea of kind of using the store in more innovative ways, I think, is definitely going to start to happen. I think you're going to see a lot more joining up of the two things. And then I think you're going to see it more from an area of like, they become more like kind of car showrooms, that kind of idea where you might just use it for specific things like testing, trying on products. But a lot of the actual transactional side, I think, is going to move online, definitely. And
Samiah, you work for Alshaya Group. I read the other day that the company was set up in 1890, it's more than 120 years old. How did you support a family-owned business such as Alshaya to transition to e-commerce to a point where they have 100 sites and apps in the MENA region?
So Alshaya, you're right, is an old family business, a Kuwaiti-based family. However, they were the first to bring a franchise model into the region, so Mothercare, Starbucks. And from there on, lots of companies have started doing that. So they have been known to be the first. Now, online, of course, when retail is so successful, online is sort of seen as a secondary, or wasn't that popular in the region then. However, COVID accelerated digital growth, and that's absolutely what happened with Alshaya. Stores closed down, they had nominal online presence, and that's what really accelerated. And once we went live with one website, one app, we saw the phenomenal response from the customers. That sort of paved the way then for further rolling out, developing regions, and we are where we are now, over 100 apps and websites throughout the region.
That's incredible. And James, you talk to a huge number of customers that sell all kinds of products all around the world. What kind of conversations are you having with these customers?
Well, actually, one of the things that struck me now just about what Samiah said is actually there was a lot more of that in Britain and America than I'd expected. I always thought that everyone was very much bought into online shopping, but it was amazing that it really was COVID that actually finally clinched it and got the buy-in from everyone. And I was surprised at how many companies still kind of begrudged the online experience up until kind of COVID came along and sort of saved their companies. COVID came along and their online experience saved their companies in that sense. So the kind of conversations I have now really, well, I would say it's changed in the last 6 months. So about 12 months ago, I would have said a lot of it was based around, massive areas of growth and how they could really expand. I think in the last 6 months, a variety of different conditions, such as the, global economic conditions right now, are tending to push things to more small, slightly shorter term transformations. So it's how do I uplift my top line? How do I improve my experience for my customers? But at the same time, it's slightly pulling back a little bit, a bit more risk averse, slightly shorter projects. How can we get time to value quickly? Whereas, maybe 12 months ago, people might have been talking about 2-year plus projects. Now it's more like, what can I do within 6 months or less?
And I'll go back to you, James. More and more retailers are talking about this concept that's headless commerce. I'm not really sure everyone actually knows what it means. How ready are retailers to start emulating the success of online juggernauts such as Lego and Boohoo?
That's a really, really great question. And I would say that we have quite a different approach to this to many of our competitors and even partners that we sometimes talk to. So the first thing that a lot of people talk about is what they would consider to be digital maturity. And there's no doubt that for many of these kind of architectures, a company who says, I talked to a company, their digital operations team is like 2 people. And they say, well, can we go composable? Can we go headless? And the typical kind of headless architecture is going to need a much larger and pretty sophisticated, operations team to run that, because instead of having a single product doing everything for you, you now have an architecture made up of multiple different products, and you've got to make sure they work together, and deployments and upgrades, all of this suddenly is now on your shoulders. The way that we've been looking at it at Salesforce is, I can understand why these companies want the benefits of headless and composable. How can we make it as easy for them to do that as it is to use the previous generation, the kind of all-in-one style solution that they used to? And that's what we've been working on. So we do believe it's feasible for people to get this kind of uplift. And we do believe it's feasible for them to take these benefits with minimal disruption to their existing day-to-day.
Samiah, how do you feel about headless commerce?
I sort of agree partly with what James is saying. It is companies. do need to go to headless, of course. There's flexibility, there's agility, and one thing we're looking at, how we actually can go faster to market now. That's one of our core things that we're looking at, and headless, of course, enables that. But then there is, of course, a cost. And operationally, do we have the teams to manage it? I think it's a bit of a balance for both. What we want to be able to do today is decouple the front-end experience from the back-end, so we can deliver features quickly, we can personalize experience for the customer. I think that's what's going to make it make a real difference as we go forward, personalization with the customer. And this enables us to do this. So I think there's lots of pros and cons. I think as a company we have to be ready for that model. But once we get there, there's lots of benefits.
Awesome. I'll stay with you, Samiah. Just coming down from a global context to a more regional context, do you think e-commerce in the Middle East is different to other regions around the world? Is there a particular playbook here that's different to maybe Europe or North America or Asia?
So e-commerce has followed the West model slightly. I mean, Amazon, for example. However, there is a lot of, I would say, different differentiators here in the region, which you have to cater for. For example, cash and delivery, and also the amount of social and mobile commerce. The amount of mobile penetration or usage here is much, much more than in other regions. Although, yes, a lot of it has been taken on board from there, but it's very much now catered to the market. It's a younger market. They want to see more. We talk about contextual or social commerce here, and I think that's growing as well.
Awesome. James, you talk to a lot of retailers around the world about moving and transitioning to e-commerce so that they can potentially future-proof their organizations. What do retailers need to do to prepare themselves for the future of e-commerce, whether it's composable, contextual, or headless?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the way to look at it to start off with is to look at your business goals. So it's very common it has been, what we've noticed in the last few years is many people just adopting headless and composable, being blunt, because kind of everyone else is. And I think that's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is, what is your personal journey as a company, or what's the individual company's actual plans and journeys, because it is specific to each individual company. And so I think the first thing to look at is, what is your business objectives? Then to look at what you actually have right now inside your company, and take an inventory of the existing technical estate that you have. It's very, very important to do this, because as you start to break this up, typically one thing we've seen in the past is companies take for granted a lot of what they were getting with an all-in-one solution, and then as they move to a kind of composable architecture, they sometimes overestimate or just assume that certain products are going to add all these features back in, and they don't realize they're having to buy these out. So just the first thing is just ensuring they're getting coverage of all of the features that they're used to. And then I think the next thing is just looking at, the process. Are your existing processes tied to your current product? And can you break those up? Because I think that's one area where sometimes people, companies want to stick to an existing process, and that can sometimes hamper them in that area. But I think the way to look at it is to look at how you can sort of keep your operations as quick and as efficient and lean as possible. And then, how you can minimize any of those kind of disruptions, kind of as Simon was saying earlier on about, do you need to grow out that operational team? And then the other thing is to look at which touch points, which ways, which channels are you going to be interacting with your customers? So social was mentioned. Do you want to have some form of in-store experience? Are you going to be doing a website and a native app? I think that's a big thing to be looking at from day one.
Simon, how about you? How can the organizations that you work with and others start to prepare themselves for the future?
James mentioned, one is really does the digital transformation or digital journey align with your business goals? It has to, otherwise, you can't do one without the other. Do you keep customer-centricity as your main point? Is that how you want to move forward? I think if you get these two things right, and using these two will enable you then to have a more seamless, connected journey with the stores, because I think today we talk about, or we have spoken about, online being separate to stores. Actually, it's the same customer in both areas. So, and that's what the customer expects. So if I'm going online, rather than not know the customer, like Jamie is saying. You want to know who the customer is. And you can only do that if you've got the data points there, if you've got analytics ready, if you've got a seamless, personalised journey. And I think this is where we're going, where the region is going as well. And also on top of that, I think it's really important is that experimentation, how this should also enable, being able to do a digital transformation enables you to try things and maybe fail as well, but then do it better next time. So I think these three things are really, really important for any company.
Amazing. I will stay on the point that you mentioned, which is basically the subject of my next question, which is around customer centricity. With so much changing all around us from a technological standpoint, process standpoint, people standpoint, how do we maintain our focus on the customer with all of these rapidly changing concepts?
So we have to give what the customer wants. We might churn out lots of products, I think, but if the customer's not using it, obviously it's not a success. So I think digital transformation is no different. You have to do it for the right reasons, so which is, of course, the customer-centric approach. So we talk about how do we know what a customer-centric approach is. Again, I would say data. Know what your customer is doing, know where they want to make a difference. They want you to make a difference to their lives. That means investing in technologies and processes that enable this. I think we touched upon this before as well, contextual commerce or social commerce, and social media, voice activate, commerce that allows you to, or applications or whatever it may be, that allows the customer to do what they're doing, like we do today, while I'm in the kitchen, maybe looking at a recipe and I think, oh, I forgot, I didn't order this, and you go to Alexa, if I can say that, go to Alexa and order something. You're used to it. So convenience is a big thing as well. So I think these things keeping the customer in mind in what they do, will absolutely accelerate this.
Yeah, absolutely. James, as you heard, Samiah talked about data being the spine of being able to become more customer-centric, understanding your customer in different ways. What do you feel we need to do in order to maintain our focus on the customer with this ever-changing landscape of e-commerce?
Yeah, well, I mean, look, firstly, I think Samiah's answer is fantastic. I totally agree. Look, the first thing you have to do is you have to be where the customer is. If you imagine like a physical situation, if all of the customers are going to the shopping mall and you're not in the shopping mall, they're not going to buy from your shop. So it's the same kind of idea. As we start to see Gen Z, actually pretty much across the world now, start to, instead of going to, for instance, Google, any kind of search engine, they might be going to Instagram or TikTok as their first place to look for products, maybe new clothing, whatever. You need to be in social commerce. So that's the first thing. You need to be where your customers are going to be. Once you've done that, Samiah did a great job of kind of talking about contextual commerce. And just for anyone who's kind of tuning in who doesn't really get it, the easiest way to define contextual commerce is, as Samiah was saying, if I'm in the kitchen and I'm cooking and I need to order something, or I'm looking at a recipe and preparing a recipe, I don't want to get taken out of my current context. So if you think of an example as, I'm looking at something and it says, hey, you can buy it from this site, and you click on it and you go to a new site, and now you have to log in, and now you have to go and find the product and things like that. Even if it just takes you to a product's existing page on a new site, and you now have to open an account, things like that. This is breaking context. You are moving from one task to another task. Whereas if you've got a buy button immediately in your current context, whether it's in a web page or an app or anything like that you're currently doing, you're actually able to stay in context and make that purchase. That's where you get that massive level of convenience. I think the last thing also that's going to really make a differentiation is personalization. Now, to date, personalization has typically meant showing the right kind of content to the right kind of people, so they're not having to sort of filter out irrelevant content. But I think it's also contextual personalization. So understanding where customers are on their buying journey, whether they're in a discovery phase, whether they're actually looking to close. I often give as an example of some kind of physical digital link up. The idea, if I walk into a store and a retailer can understand who I am as their customer, maybe I've got something that was left in my basket online, maybe I've been doing a lot of searches around a certain product, and you have those products in store. This would be a great way to come and engage with me rather than just come up and say, how's things going today? Say, would you be interested in seeing these products? So I think that ability to be very personalized in that sense and give a very joined up experience, those are really going to be differentiators moving forward.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty scared about the future of e-commerce with all this contextual stuff. I'm a massive sucker to clicking on the screen. If you put buy now anywhere on any of my digital touch points, I'm clicking on it.
Sorry, just to interrupt that point.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, if you think about, like, we mentioned Amazon already, they're being brought up. If you think about Amazon Prime, if you ever pause, they have a thing called X-ray, which will tell you who are the current actors in the scene. If they tell me right now, you can imagine they move to a situation, it doesn't seem like it could be that far ahead, where all the products in the scene are brought up as well. So I remember watching a show and I was like, I really like that lamp, but I couldn't find it anywhere online. But can you imagine if it's just like, you can click it, it's like that lamp is there, and you can just, there's a buy button. I will never, ever have money ever again after that moment. So, yeah.
Exactly. I'm a triathlete, and triathletes love stuff. And Instagram knows about my triathlon hobby and always recommends stuff for me to buy. So I just have a massive garage of things that I buy through this contextual commerce business. So yeah, I'm pretty scared about where it's going to go. Samiah, what advice would you give to any new customer that's about to, any new company, excuse me, that's about to embark on a digital customer journey focused on e-commerce?
I think, it goes back to what we discussed before. Keep the customer at the heart of what you do and why you're doing it. Make sure it aligns back to your company goals. And there's something really interesting I read yesterday on LinkedIn. And we're talking about, 10 times or 10%. I think the 10 times, think big. That's what I would say, incremental change is great, but that's not what's going to make a difference. And we can see a lot of companies out there which didn't do that, Kodak, for example. Like you mentioned, the market is changing. My young son, who's 10, he does all his buying through contextual commerce. That's what influences him, absolutely, whether it's a YouTube or social or Instagram or whatever it is, that's how he buys. So I think it's really important that we keep our eyesight on the future while we still are in the present and doing our day-to-day.
Amazing. And James, how about yourself? What advice would you give to a company making that transition towards e-commerce?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, I think really it's to stick with flexibility. I think that's really, really important. You need that flexibility. I think the flexibility in the data-driven approach because you need that flexibility to be able to move quite quickly. If suddenly there is a trend and you're starting to be able to move towards that, that's great. And this is one of the things that breaking open these all-in-one solutions allows you to do. If all of your business data, your business functionality, things like promotions, offerings, can be exposed to multiple different channels quickly, then you have that freedom to experiment. But also, yeah, do this in a data-driven way. We've been saying this from the start, really. When you have business objectives, they need to be objectives that are KPI measurable. And it's the same with this. You don't just experiment randomly for 2 years and say, did we succeed? You need to be able to kind of use data to drive that and understand which of your investments are working well and how they're working together as well. So it's not just like, you have to understand how these channels are being used. So some channels might be used more for discovery, and other channels might be used for direct, transactions and so on like that. But yeah, data-driven approach and that flexibility to change.
I'm just slightly off script. I've got a couple of questions for both of you. One of the things that customers are telling us that they're struggling to do is to demonstrate value, demonstrate a return on investment when it comes to transitioning or at least trying to persuade their organizations to move towards headless commerce. What's the best way to create some type of framework around a return on investment model that allows you to go to your senior people and say, listen, we need to spend X millions of dollars trying to move towards headless or composable?
If that's a question to me first. Yes. I think, it's very difficult because not everyone understands what does headless give you per se. But I think what's really key is if agility, being able to deliver to the market quick enough, is one of your key KPIs, then a monolith system will never give you that. If you want to be able to decouple and give more personalized front-end experiences. Again, react to the customer quickly, because you'll see, a lot of, if you don't do, a lot of the large organizations are already doing this. So you're going to have to connect to the customer somehow in a personalized way. I think this is one of the things that you have to set and try and set with the company. Okay, it's an investment, but you have to be honest, that is a 2-3 years maybe investment. But I think it's really important that the culture is changed. So once you move that culture towards this, then the business will see the benefit.
Amazing. We heard about agility, we heard about culture. James, how about yourself? How do we create a framework around ROI or value?
So firstly, I agree with Simon's approach. I actually feel that for most companies, it is the long-term benefits that I'm more excited about. That, like I said, the ability to, you really do get phenomenal agility when you move to this. And what we mean by that is the ability to make changes to the site once it's live, once it's in a headless or composable framework. You're just able to make changes much more quickly. And I do think that's a long-term benefit. I also think the ability to move to different touch points quickly is a long-term benefit. However, trying to get the best of all worlds, it's quite difficult to convince retailers about these kind of longer-term benefits without short-term benefits as well. So one of the things that we've been working on is that typically one of the advantages of also, another advantage of going composable and headless is the ability to really fine-tune that user experience. And by fine-tuning it, you can typically get things like better SEO, so higher levels of organic traffic, and better performance through the site. And simply put, high levels of performance through a site lead to high levels of engagement. There's just a very, very strong correlation between the two. So we've actually been able to do this with some of our customers, where they do an A/B split test across their existing site versus their composable site, and immediately measure the benefits from that. And typically those benefits are right across the board. So, reduced bounce rate, increased number of visits to the site, increased number of pages viewed, increased average order value, increased conversion rate. So you should, if everything went well, see the top line go up pretty quickly, almost immediately, and you'd be able to see those short-term benefits as well as the longer-term benefits. And the two other areas I was just going to mention is, one, the ability to also ensure that you're keeping that total cost of ownership down, keep that controlled as well. That's a thing you really need to watch for. And secondly, in certain situations with some architectures, you're actually able to start doing this maybe a page or two at a time, which can also give incremental benefits much more quickly. So your ROI comes back within even weeks rather than months. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities even for that short-term benefit. But I totally agree with Simon that the longer-term benefits are the larger ones. They're just maybe harder to convince some companies to go with.
James, that makes a lot of sense. Samiah, James, thank you for joining TechForce Middle East today. You've both helped us to understand where e-commerce is moving to in the Middle East and beyond, and how companies of any size can prepare for it. And thank you, dear listener, for joining us on this episode of TechForce, and look forward to seeing you on the next one.